Hello, and welcome back for another episode. Today, I'm talking with an old friend, somebody I actually grew up with in school many years ago. So it's pretty neat to be able to talk to him. This is Travis Rankin, and Travis has been involved in some pretty interesting stuff recently, and I want to hear about why he got into it and what he's thinking about why it's happening. So, Travis, do you want to maybe introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. My name's Travis Rankin. I grew up in the Cowichan Valley, as did my father and my grandfather, and my great grandfather was in Victoria. So we've got a long history here. I run a metal fabrication business. I build gates and railings and all sorts of custom stuff, artwork. Um, and yeah, I love this little valley. I moved away for about 10 years and then came back. And when I came back in 2012, we didn't really see any of this stuff happening. I think it was probably around the same time that opiates were starting to come to the surface, and it's just been getting worse and worse lately. So to start, I guess what we're talking about is the group I formed, which is called Canadian Citizens Against Crime and Public Drug Abuse, and it just started naturally in January this year when we were seeing things escalate pretty rapidly, and I kept it just every time you open Facebook, somebody in town is complaining about either shoplifting or vandalism or public drug abuse by the school, or just the decay of the downtown core. So I just started the group to kind of give a place for local people to start talking about this stuff and try and round up new ways to organize together to be able to figure out what the solutions are. And it just took off. In 1 week, in just over 1 week, we had 1,600 members. For 2 weeks it was. We're up to 2,500 members now. It's been just over 2 months. We've held a couple rallies, one quite successful rally.
Yeah, no, I've that's how became aware of what you're doing, and it's very impressive how. But I think that there's more of an appetite for trying to do something about how bad things are getting than I've ever seen.
Right.
And so for myself, I started to realize how the governments and the institutions that kind of run things are often misleading at best and often straight up lying. Like many years ago, that's not a new
Right.
bit of information for me,
Right.
but. I think in a lot of ways, COVID really sort of turned the dial for me and said, okay, if this gets too far, we're going to lose the ability to function as society, right? And we have to say, whoa, 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 there's limits to what you can just impose on people. And we have to be able to say no to certain things if it's applicable. But since you're focused particularly on the opioids and the drug issues, what do you think is what do you think is kind of behind getting that ball rolling initially? So if it started maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where do you think it all began?
The problem, you mean? Like what's snowballed it? Well, I think it was, I mean, the drugs itself, outside of the government's control, as opiates kind of came online. We're seeing it all across North America and around the world, all in LA. The drug use and these opiates they're not just like regular drugs. They get in your closet and you can't get out, right? So it's not like it's not, people often can't find their way out of it by themselves. So it's just creating more addicts. So it just kind of cascades and gets bigger. What's happening with, and it is also surrounded around COVID and some of that stuff, because the government overreach has completely ruined, society in so many different ways. The biggest thing that's happened in the last year is the pilot program that BC is engaged in for the decriminalization and the safer supply, and the taking away the consequences from the courts, and shifting crime into the realm of mental health, which it's valid in ways, but it's taken away the ability for people to find consequence. So as soon as someone's on the street, high on drugs, hunched over, lighting fires, it's no longer a criminal issue, it's a mental health issue. So the police, it's kind of out of the police hands, and they're called an ambulance or something. And so
Yeah.
it's got diverted the consequence.
So that's kind of the heart of it, I think, in many ways, is the ability to respond to these things has been taken away from the legal system.
That's right.
And um, if you talk to somebody who's a proponent of this stuff, right? The safe supply is what they would call it. They speak in this language that says, well, this is what's compassionate because we don't want to punish people for being addicts. And there was even a time like a number of years ago where on the face of it, I would have agreed with that, because if you're a drug addict, just making your life more miserable doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Right.
So that kind of pulls you in and goes, oh, okay, we're gonna just, but as you say, like there's a criminal element that comes up here because these people aren't necessarily being good members of society, and that is problematic for other people. So one of the things I see that I find it hard that people don't understand this, but like, if you're going to be so compassionate to one person who's an addict, who's being a thief, or maybe even committing an assault, you're being very, very discompassionate or uncompassionate to the people who run the store, or the person who runs the business, or the just individual on the street. And so is it really compassion? Is it like, it's an important question, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks. Like we're getting a lot of, I mean, it's amazing how little resistance we're having for such an energetic movement, but there is, you know, a constant theme of compassionate people. You know, people call them bleeding hearts and all that stuff. And I know that they're coming from what they feel to be a helpful way, but it doesn't help to enable crime, you know. And it's like, and I like to come back to the fact that there's a lot of people on the street that aren't causing problems. So it's not against all the unhoused, or it's not the less fortunate, or people in circumstance. It's against criminals. It's against people that are causing problems, that are lighting fires, burning buildings down, that are, you know, stealing stuff and are doing violent crimes, you know, threatening the public. And then there's also, you know, I find it a crime, I mean, not legally, it's not a crime, public drug abuse. I think it is a crime because our children are seeing it. Our elderly are scared to go to the store. They're scared to go out of their house. Our downtown isn't safe anymore. So that in itself is a crime, is crime enough for me to make that a criminal thing. And that's what the government has taken away as a crime. Like there was just today, I got posts of people in Walmart, they're smoking crack or meth or whatever in the bathroom in Walmart. Like, how is that okay? How is that not, like, why are they not being apprehended right there, you know?
Yeah, I agree. You know, one of the things that I've put a lot of time into thinking about, not just in the last few years, but throughout most of my life, is just how fragile good order in society is, how easily that could be taken away from us, and how unprepared people are for the consequence of a society that you can't trust anymore.
Right.
And what it feels like is that this situation is starting to really pull the rug out from that fabric. Because like you say, you know, if the elderly or children can't go downtown without being concerned about having to deal with some very unfortunate but serious issues, that's not going to work very long. Like there's going to be more problems arise out of this that we don't want to even begin to start to see.
For sure.
And I'm concerned about a lot of elements, but one of them would be like, what happens if somebody does get assaulted and the police don't do anything? And then the citizenry go, well, we're going to do something.
Well, that's right. Yeah. That's a very slippery slope. And we're seeing more and more of that energy all the time. And I try to be, you know, in the group, try to be really careful and diligent of trying to quell that down. But there's, you know, people, you know, inside or outside the group, people that are going to start taking things in their own hands when it's coming to their doorstep and in the front lawn and endangering your family. There's, you know, they're not going to have it. So
exactly. And this is again why we need, okay, so take a step back. Society needs a system of laws, and the reason that comes about is because people have to have parameters on their behavior with each other.
right.
If you and that needs to have consequence if you break it, right? So I was reading these articles this week about our idiot prime ministers saying things like, it was something like, leave the fob or the keys to your car near your front door, so if the thieves break into your house to steal your car, it's easier to get the keys, and then you don't have to, like, what are we talking about here? Like
right. Yeah. No. Yeah, might as well just leave a bag of drugs for them at the front door. So they just don't come in the house, right? Like,
Yeah, so it's so hard to conceive of that being a serious statement. Like it
Yeah,
just boggles my mind.
yeah,
But it ties into something else too, because one of the things I want to point out here for everybody who might be watching is like we're talking about Duncan, where we both grew up. It's a smaller town on Vancouver Island. My brother lives in Red Deer, Alberta. They have the same problem there. I have a friend who I train with who spends half the year in Nova Scotia, and they have the same problem there. So it's spread out across the whole country.
right.
And it's all coming down from the top then, right? It's all coming down from this federal framework, I guess. And so as a grassroots organization, how do you conceive of trying to deal with that when it's such a higher level problem?
Yeah, that's I mean that's the number one question. That's good. That's the solution we need to find because this isn't. I mean, initially we have to look at our front door and the circle around us, our vicinity around us is always your first, is your only applicable, resolution center that you can focus on. But I mean, it's a really hard question because at first I want to focus on our town because that's what we are. Second, hopefully, if we could find the solutions here and build a model, have something repeatable that you can work into other areas of the problem, other areas of town, so that's where the power of being able to focus here generally and then expand. Number one in BC, we are going for the BC provincial government to retract its decriminalization policies. So trying to build up a big enough movement and resistance in the whole province to stop that, right? And I've been having meetings after meetings after meetings. I've been with the Duncan mayor, the mayor of North Cowichan. I just had a Zoom call with Tamara Cronus, which is she's a really successful human rights lawyer, and she's also the conservative candidate for Nanaimo. And I actually initially contacted her to have some legal advice to figure out, what avenues we can move towards for kind of bringing these things to the table and legally bringing forward cases or at least notices of order to kind of push in the directions. And she boiled it down to at this point it's almost a lost cause because number one, you're fighting the government. They're with our money. They've got the biggest lawyers. When you go into the court, it's going to take years to get to the Supreme Court, and then they're even bought. So, I mean, she's a really high up lawyer, and she's saying like that's not, the biggest thing that we can do now, and she is a conservative candidate, so of course she's going to be kind of pushing that way, is getting out the vote and getting the people that are in power out of power and getting people in there that are passionate about fixing it in power. So as much as I don't believe in the government, the policies, and the whole web of lies that's going on around that right now, that it does feel like that is our fighting chance to at least change some of the structure and get it moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that's all. There's a bunch of stuff there that's really interesting that needs to be discussed and brought out into the public sort of dialogue. So one of the things, like the reason I started the podcast and I started it back in 2022 was because of the COVID issues. Because I found myself suddenly in a situation where questioning the government's, information puts you in this very deplorable category. And
Right.
and I never really had to think about this before because I've always just sort of lived my life and the government was outside of it and whatever. Yeah, I didn't really care. But if you look around the world at the different forms of government that exist, I don't like totalitarianism. I don't like dictatorships. I don't like any absolute rule because then you don't get to question what's going on. You can't have any effect on change. So the solution that humanity sort of come up with, the Western society has come up with, is democracy. Okay, we have democracy. Democracy is very corrupted right now. It's very, very, very problematic, but it's still the only avenue that's non-violent towards
Right.
a better end. So I concur with the lawyer you're talking about in that if we can get this government out of BC and a conservative government in, or at least give them the opposition status,
Right.
we can have a little bit more leverage towards policymaking. And so, for example, because again, with the COVID issues were largely part of my motivation to get this started originally, I had two people on in 2022 who were nurses who were fired for not getting COVID jabs,
Right.
and they're still not rehiring them today because the policy hasn't changed. That's not logical. That's not scientific. That's not anything other than political ideology.
Right.
And it made me reinvestigate that. So my point is this. I don't think this government can change their mind. I don't think they're actually capable of altering that policy, their policies. I think we have to get new people in. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% agree. And I mean, and like I said, just like you, politics have never been in my sphere even. I've just been running my business, doing my family, doing my life. And it's only because of, COVID, number one, and then this, that now I'm starting to look at it and get some more information. And I think that's the difference now, is that because of COVID and these problems are so prominent everywhere, more people, it feels like, are actually taking notice and stepping up. So with that, we do have a potential of actually changing the game if people actually do get out and vote. Hopefully it's not just more of the same from a different color, but
well, one of the things I was saying for the last few years is if things don't change and this kind of ideology continues to ride its course, it's going to get really crazy. And it's already showing like the issue that you're bringing up with the drug addiction and the homelessness and stuff. You mentioned the idea if it's coming to your doorstep. Well, it will, right? Like it's going to get to the point where it's like you don't have property rights. You don't have the right to defend your own family in your own house. And like that's not going to work. That's just not going to work unless you're looking for chaos, which is concerning potential, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, it is at a lot of our people's doorsteps. I'm getting messages every day from businesses and residents that are dealing with us on a daily basis. One really concerning thing that just happened, I had a meeting with North Cowichan on Wednesday so that they could kind of walk me through what their plan was. And it was good. Like it was clear and honest, and it seemed like they had their heart in the right place and things were going on. But we discussed a few things. When I held the rally, there was the whole downtown core that was full. Like it was like piles of garbage and huts and drug users everywhere, all concentrated in that one spot. Well, the day before the rally, there was an RCMP town hall, and it was a public meeting with the RCMP asking us what are our biggest problems? What can they do to help us? And the question and answer. And it was hands down, the whole conversation was about the drug use and the crime downtown. Basically, they said our hands are tied. Because of the laws and the court systems, we can only do so much. So they suggested that we put pressure on the higher levels of government to change the court systems and the laws so that it gives them more power. Well, that night, they were employed, and I've been digging at this until this meeting on Wednesday, by someone, the mayors or whatever, and they cleaned that whole area out. I think there was like 3 homeless people there when we had the rally. There was a couple little, but the whole area was clean. It looked like they pressure washed the streets practically. There was no garbage. There was, so to me, that makes me think that they're trying to hide it. Right. And which pissed me off because they want us to pressure the government. So we brought the media, we had global TV, we had CTV there, and then boof, it's all gone. Right. Like the fairies came in and cleaned it up. Then they came back, the mayor, and then right then I pinned it on the Duncan mayor and the North Cowichan mayor, like, what's going on? Why are you trying to hide this, pretend it doesn't exist? And they both called me for meetings, like, you can't accuse us of doing that. And we didn't do it. And we don't know why. And they did it for safety for the people. And I get that because you can't control a group of people and all that here. Anyway, so in the meeting, they kept saying, we did that. I'm like, so did you do it? Like, I'm asking. And they're like, well, no, I did. And then in the end, they're like, yeah, we did. So it was like, so I caught them right in it, right? And then and since the rally, the downtown corridor area has been way less, but the people have been spread out all around town now. Rather than being in one spot, they're all in different pockets of town. So since the rally, I've been getting emails like, thank you so much. It's so much cleaner down there. My life is easier. From my aunt, I have another uncle in the area. I've got people in that Lewis Street area that are just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. It's working, right? But then I'm getting calls from every other part of town. I just went down and measured window bars for another store because there's people camping and the thing. So now it's spread out all over the town, which you know, from the municipality's eyes is better because there's less of a concentration. It doesn't seem so big, but now it's infecting everywhere. So then in our meeting, that was part of their model. They wanted to do a town hall with my group so that they could present this idea to us as a solution. And essentially what it was is that they build small scale camps or sites for these people. And he literally said in every community of the valley, so that it shares the load to all the different communities, so that everybody in the valley has to handle this in a smaller scale. I'm like, that's going to be a pretty hard sell. Like, yeah, right. And then I sat on it for 3 days. I'm just like, what? No. So then I just made a big post about it. I just threw them all under the bus. I called out the RCMP. I'm like, here's my phone number. Call me. But this is not happening essentially. But that's dangerous. Like, you're gonna put camps. Everybody that's coming to our door. Well, that'll do it.
Wow, that's amazing information in a way, though. But okay, first thing I want to say there, though, is good on you for holding them to account and not letting them say you're not allowed to say that about us.
Right.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
Right.
The government is a servant of the people. That's their role. And this whole thing that they get to hide behind their authority it drives me crazy, because they only have authority because we give it to them.
That's right.
And so so this is one of those things where just in general, I just do not buy into any of this. They're holier than thou bullshit. They're not.
That's right. Yeah.
And so good on you for that part of it. At least I think so. But you know, that actually sort of illustrates one of the deeper element of this is like, hey, what's making all these people become so lost, so you know, such lost souls, and what do we actually do about it that fixes it? Because all the government's talking about in that plan, which is crazy, is to just give them the space to live out their lives as addicts. Right. And what do we really want to do that? Is that like, are we encouraging addiction as a lifestyle?
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like you say, hang your keys doors on the outside of your door so that they're not stealing. Like,
what are we talking about?
What are we talking about here? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that, okay, so I'm going to pull it into a little bit of a deeper, bigger sort of thing, in that, you know, human prosperity has to be tied to giving people meaning in their lives, right? And one of the things that I think is driving this at a deeper level is that there's no clear understanding of how to live as a person anymore, as a human being. Right. And so people fall back on indulgences. Right. And that could be the indulgences, and there's a lot of terrible ones right now, right? The drugs are part of it, but I mean, like on a larger societal scale, there's porn addictions, and there's just social media addictions, and then there's all these things that are like trying to fill that void, but they never do. Right. And so one of the things I'm interested in, even though it's a big question, is how we could facilitate a means for people to remember and rediscover meaning in a deeper way. Right. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and that's about, you know, compassion and community and connection, right? Because it's a loss of connection.
Yeah.
That, you know, I mean, the human life is actually quite basic. You need food, shelter, and connection. You need to be able to feel heard. You need to be able to feel seen. You need to feel respected. You also need to respect yourself in order to relate that connection as well, right? So, I mean, I see these people smoking drugs on the grass in front of the high school, right in front of the busy traffic going by, as a swan song. They don't have, they're maybe not literally from what they're trying to do, but an emotional, heartfelt way. They're just like, somebody see me. Like, I don't want this, but does nobody see me? They're just going by, smoking their drugs right there on the corner, right? Yeah. I know I've done a lot of different things, and I definitely wouldn't be doing it in public like that unless I was crying for help, right? These people need help, and they need guidance. Yeah. And help and guidance is, you know, just like with our children, we need to create a container that puts boundaries around what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. If you just let a kid do whatever it wants, it'll just keep pushing the boundaries until they're gone, right?
Yeah.
But if you contain them and you hold them and you care for them and you put consequences there that they can bump up against, then they know where they stand, right? And then they can move into a more balanced place.
Well, that's so true. And a couple things about that I think are really important is one, this idea that like they're just living out their what they want to do in their lives when they're living on the street as addicts, right? Like that's just what they want to do. So let's let them do that. It's like no, nobody's gonna want to live like that. That's not a thing. And then the other, and so what that means though is that like it's okay to say to the people in that situation, you can do better. You can get better than this. You can overcome this and become a more fulfilled person. But that message gets interpreted by the people that propagate this idea as judgmental and intolerant because you're not giving them the room to be who they are. But that comes back to boundaries. So what a human being is when they thrive is something that can be sort of like delineated. Like I said, this is what that is.
Yeah.
And if you're not living in that framework, then you have work to do to get to there. And we need to encourage that work to get there. Not just say, okay, keep doing fentanyl on the street and whatever hell, because that's not healthy. And I think that we've gone so far down this path of crazy interpretation of compassion that it's kind of like anything you do is okay because I don't want to possibly be perceived as being judgmental.
Right.
Yeah. And then the other thing you said too, that's super important, and it has to do with right down to child psychology elements, is that boundaries are tied in to the feeling of safety in the person. And if you don't know what the limits are of what's acceptable, you never feel comfortable in your own in where you are. And then you're always going to be searching for that, and you'll do it in all the wrong ways. And so like if a child falls down and bangs their knee, you hug them. And a hug is a boundary. You're safe here, right? Yeah. And that's so important because again, that gets interpreted as almost like a judgmental thing. Like we're going to put a boundary on this child, and that's no, but the child needs it. And so does,
absolutely. Yeah, and it is also quite complex because there is mental issues and there is trauma issues, and it's not, like I want to be careful not to say that this is a one size fit all kind of protocol, but the main problem is that we don't have those structures and facilities in place to give the care for these people. These drugs, fentanyl and like the drugs they're doing and the drugs they're handing out, these aren't just toys. These aren't just little things that you can give to people, turn them back onto the street and expect them to make a better choice, right? More drugs only lead to more drugs and more despair and more harm to the body. So I'm not against safe supply if it's done in a clinical setting, like the purpose of safe supply in my eyes is to reduce harm on the body, the withdrawal, the rejection, that part, but it's got to be in a way towards healing and abstinence, because the only way out of these hard drugs, opiates and the like, is abstinence. You can't just do a little bit and expect that you're going to be okay, right? These are hard drugs. This isn't weed, right?
Yeah. So, well, on that note, I've been looking at the situation because I know of at least 4 people that are connected to people I know through family and friends on a larger scale that have died in the last 8 months from overdoses.
Right.
And a lot of them are like younger guys and, in their 20s kind of thing. And when I was a young guy in my 20s, I was pretty crazy, and I was kind of willing to experiment in kind of crazy ways. And I'm really glad I'm not 20 now, because that is scary.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, this is kind of anecdotal, but it connects. You were talking about like the city council and the mayor and stuff sort of cleaning up downtown for the photo op.
Right.
Did you know that in San Francisco, which is like a hotbed of this issue, when Xi Jinping, the president of China, showed up about 4 or 5 months ago, they cleaned up downtown San Francisco.
Really? Yeah.
Right. And it's like, who do you think you're fooling here? What is this?
Right.
Yeah. Like, we live here. This is our home, right?
That's right.
Yeah. It blew me away, right? Because like, you want to impress him. You don't want to impress the constituents in your municipality, that you govern. You want to impress this foreign dictator, essentially. Like, it's crazy.
And to show your power in being able to clean this up,
Yeah.
Why can't you do that at a normal time? Like, and where are you putting these people?
Yeah.
You know, like, what are you doing with them? Where did they go? Right? They just poof, disappear. They're gone for 2 days and then they just slowly come back in. Well,
Yeah.
they went somewhere. And it's, you know, and I've been having conversations with the mayors about COVID. And when COVID happened, the government poured a ton of money into the valley, and they were able to essentially purchase the Ramada Hotel, a bunch of other buildings, put in some communities, and they housed every single person on the street for COVID, and they gave them all their amenities so they didn't have to go anywhere. So that, because the COVID protocol was like not to be out and not to be engaging with other people, so they housed them all, and they fed them all, and they looked after them all
Huh.
during COVID, which is amazing, right? And I mean,
Huh.
and
I
they,
didn't
and
know that.
I don't know if that's not an answer either, because we like, you want people to have slight amount of difficulty, so they want to find a better way. So I'm not sure if that was applicable, but maybe it was enough of a container that held them snug enough that did give that direction. I'm not sure, but soon as I mean, this is part of the conversation too. I was like, so when the funding ran out, you just said time's up, you kicked them out, and you closed the doors, and they're like, yep. They did, and they did it incrementally, right? We had to close this one down, and we closed this one down. They just shoved them back onto the street, right? So,
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. That's wild. Yeah, so I agree that that may not be like an absolute solution, but it points in a direction.
right,
And I think one of the things you said too a moment ago, which is a big part of that, is like if we're gonna take a person and put them into into the system in a way that because say they do some shoplifting or something, right? They get their name into the system. It can't be just like we're just going to facilitate you to continue to live this way.
that's
It
right.
has to be, we're going to try to steer you in a direction that gets you off of these problems into a better future.
That's right.
And that's the opposite of just safe supply continuously. It's more of a reasoned and safe, graduated deconnection from this lifestyle or something like that, right? And there's a guy named Michael Schellenberger. Do you know who that is?
No, I haven't heard it. No.
So he's a reporter, and he's been doing an amazing job in the last couple of years of breaking all these incredible stories. And one of them was he wrote a book called San Francisco, which is the story of what happened in San Francisco, because he's a resident there. And he
Right.
talks about the idea that in other countries in the world, I think Portugal is one of the one that comes up.
Yeah.
They've decriminalized drugs, but if you get caught up in the legal system, you are put into a rehab focused program.
Yeah.
And that doesn't allow you to continue to live that way if you're breaking the law. And
That's
you're
right.
in that sense. And it seems to work, at least from his perspective, it seems to work. I haven't super researched it, but I think there's some merit there. And so what he says is, you got to have a system that has both a carrot and a stick, right? So
That's right.
nobody, I don't think anybody in the group that you created or whatever would say, oh, we want to make life worse for these people, right? We don't
No.
want to just hurt them anymore. But we have to say, as you said, a boundary. And then you can't cross this boundary without consequences.
Right.
Because I mean, it's just fundamental. You just, if you have no consequences, people are not going to behave without that, right? Like that's just how society's always worked.
That's right. I mean, that's human behavior, and that's how it works. You know, that's how it's always worked. What's been dissolved lately with this lack of consequence. I was just going to say something else too.
Sorry?
I was thinking of something else I was going to say, but I lost it. So
Oh.
come back to me.
Well,
Portugal, that's what it was. They've also, it's decriminalized. I haven't researched it deeply yet either, but this is what I'm hearing is that they've decriminalized it, but the stigma is still there. You can't use it in public. If they catch you using it in public, you get whatever, a fine and some sort of consequence. And then if you keep getting caught, then you get incarcerated and then you get put into rehab. So it's decriminalized, so which in that effect is good. So you're not calling them bad for being addicted. That's the truth, right? So that's in itself, that's what it is. But if you're doing it in public and you're infecting the society with it, then that's a problem, right? And then you're fed into the system. And I think that's the model that we need to move towards. We don't want to build, a separate town for all these people to just burn themselves out and keep using drugs into. We want to provide them a safe place that they can go and held in a container to some degree that they can, if they're functioning okay, they can do kind of as they please. But if they start pushing the boundaries, then they need a little bit of consequence. And some of that consequence will be rehabilitation and detox and getting back. And I think one of the a good tool in that on the later stages of someone that's gone through rehab and is clean for a certain amount of time is not to go back on the street, to go back to where it was, or go back into the community dynamic that they were led into drugs with, but to go to work. So go to a working camp, like a fishing camp or a logging camp or tree planting camp or whatever. And, maybe for the first month, they only work a couple hours a day and but they're out there with people that are working and they're eating and they're communicating with healthy people that aren't using drugs, and go and transition back into some sort of purpose of life that way. Might be a tool.
Absolutely. So a couple things came to my mind when you said that. One of them is an old memory, like an old memory back in I don't know, maybe 2000, like 1999, 2000. I got a job working at a little summertime ice cream store at the art gallery downtown that was run by this old hippie couple. And they were wonderful. It was a really fun summer. I was 19, 20, and they paid pretty well. And I just got to hang out and serve ice cream and this pretty girl I was working with and the whole thing, right? It was great. And one of the people that I got to know was essentially a street, homeless guy, right? And he would come in and he was a nice guy. You could tell that in his heart, he was a nice guy. But every once in a while, I'd see him just wasted drunk, like sleeping on the street, right? And so this is back when that wasn't really as big of a problem, but it was still there.
Right.
And I realized I want to help him. I want to help him. But there's nothing I could have done at that point. And so I think the balance between what people call the stigma of being a drug addict and living on the streets versus the idea that that's not a good way to live is a really important one to suss out, because I cared about that guy to a certain, to the degree I could, but there's no way that I would want him to continue to live that way if there was anything I could do to change it.
Right.
And so that's different than a judgment of saying you're a bad person.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to sort of look at that. So another example, I'm right now doing the last bit of a 2-year acupuncture diploma program. And we're doing a clinical experience at an old folks home, at a care home.
Right.
And it's not too far away from East Hastings in Vancouver here. And so it's a rough area. And some of the staff members have told me that there's concerns when they go to their cars, especially at night, because there's people walking around. And you see these people, and it's like they're a danger to the staff members, especially because a lot of them are like young, are like women, and they're pretty small. They're Asian women for a large extent, and they're easy pickings in that sense. And so I don't want those people to be able to harass these other people, but it's not because I think that they're just hopelessly bad people. I think they're lost, and that balance again, right? It's not an absolute judgment. It's just, you can't do this, and I want to help you, but you have to get better to be helped, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I mean, people do what's within their faculty of mind, right? So people are, everybody's doing the best they can. Sometimes there's not a lot of options. Most times it's the easiest route. So rather than facing the problem of addiction or trying to find a better way, which is quite difficult, right? It's easier to get another fix. So that's why addiction comes in so strongly, especially with these opiates. But I do see the heart in people individually, because this comes back to everyone's doing the best they can. If they could do better, they would, right? But people need to want to go better, because it's hard, right? And they need to feel, to some degree accepted in that, or at least encouraged and supported somehow. But right now, what we're in, we don't have that. We have more drugs. So
we have this model that's, again, like, just keep doing what you're doing if that's what you want to do. And it's like, no. So again, to come back to this training I've been doing for the last couple of years with acupuncture, because I've really become an advocate for Chinese medicine as a part of the healthcare issues, a solution to part of the healthcare issues. As I did a workshop with a guy who works in downtown East Side Vancouver with the drug addicts, and he does acupuncture for them. But and so it's a really interesting strategy. And the one thing he said, and I kind of picked at him on this a little bit to make sure I was understanding it, is he found that if you could give a person a acupuncture treatment who's an addict for a period of time, maybe up to a day, they don't go seeking for more drugs because they're feeling balanced again.
Right.
But then the lifestyle kicks in again, and then it comes back up. And of course, there's physiological addictions too. It's a chemical addiction in the body. So that's a complicated thing.
Right.
But it really illustrates the idea that it's an imbalance that drives a person to want to do these kinds of drugs. And that imbalance, there is ways to rebalance people and help them develop that. So to go back to Michael Schellenberger, because I really like the guy. He's done some amazing, and not just on this homelessness issues, but on a whole bunch of issues. But he talked about, like, where was I going with that? He talked about the idea that people oh God, I lost my train of thought. Hold on, what was I talking about? So we're talking about
Acupuncture treatment, balancing people.
Right. Okay, so people are driven to do these behaviors out of a need that's not being fulfilled.
Right.
And what you need to do in bringing them into what you might say the system, to get them into the court system or the rehab program system or whatever, is to also facilitate for them an alternative to doing the drugs.
Right.
And so giving them something like an acupuncture treatment, which is really simple to do ultimately if you know how to do it, right? It just takes a bit of time. Yeah. Shows that person they can actually exist without this craving.
Right.
And then the door starts to open more.
That's right.
But what happens now is, even if you did that for a person, they go back to their lifestyle on the street, and then there's people saying, oh, here's some fentanyl. I don't want you to be, to feel bad about not having it. And it's like, that's the opposite of what we should be doing.
That's right. Yeah. That's a very expensive solution, but because that's where you got to be able to build care facilities that people can rely on. Like, they're building these apartment buildings in town now that are wet buildings. So they're allowed to use drugs and live in them and do as they please inside the building. The police or the fire stations go in there almost every day to put out fires, and they're just basically running a free for. They're building them apartment complexes and letting them run wild inside there. That's not healing modality, right? There's no care there. There's just more people doing drugs, talking about doing drugs, experiencing drugs. There's no sort of holistic care at all. So that's not, so the end of the story is that the government's spending millions, if not billions of dollars for this drug problem. It could easily be going the other way and creating more holistic ways to treating it or dealing with it.
Interesting. Okay. So, I've thought about that, an aspect of that before, because, like, if you want to get them into a facility that helps put them on the path to a better life, it has to exist, right? You have to have a place for that to happen. But it can't be just like, okay, go into this building and do whatever you want without consequence, right? It has to have some structure there in that sense. Like, there's a guy, I just discovered him on X, Twitter, or whatever, the last couple of weeks, and he went and filmed what was going on in one of these drug distribution centers in downtown Vancouver.
I saw that video.
Yeah, and it's like, this is terrible. These people aren't being helped.
Yeah, they're like sleeping in their food and just like, is that the one?
Yeah. And it's everywhere. They're in the hallways. They're like laying and having, like, it's terrible. It's terrible. And I don't know how anybody can call that compassionate, because it's not compassionate to do that.
No, not at all.
Yeah. But I think it's important to bring up the financial side of it, like you said. Yeah. If we were to facilitate some means for rehabilitation for these people in a structured system, it would cost a lot of money. But I think that this is relevant towards the whole entire healthcare crisis that's been going on in BC.
Absolutely.
is it's like you spend money now to help things get better, and then in the end, you're going to save a lot more money because people aren't going to be living in terrible ways.
That's right. Yeah.
There is always a cost to everything, and we just have to choose what's better. And one of the problems, and I have a couple contacts in the BC Conservative Party candidates that I'm going to be speaking to. I've already spoken to about this.
Right.
Is we have election cycles that are 4 years, right? And so a party will come in and they'll be like, we're going to do this and this and this to fix things.
Yeah.
And it may or may not work very well. Obviously, right now it's not working. And then they'll have an election, and then a new party will come in with a new plan, and then it never sustains itself.
Right.
And we have to think long term here, right? Like if a person's been a street addict for 10 years, it's not going to take 1 year for them to become totally rehabbed.
Right. That's right.
And so it is an investment, but it's an investment towards an end long term that will benefit everyone.
Yeah.
And getting people to accept and work with that, it's very challenging.
Well, I think that, I mean, that's just a point towards the true problem, and that's money. I think that there's a lot of people making money on this too. Like there's the government funding and the granting the not-for-profits, the CEOs that are making bank on these systems that are getting money from the government that we can't even look at their bank accounts because of it. They're making a few hundred grand a year. They don't want the problem to be fixed. Like we're gathering more people to gather more intel to uncover these things, but it's a pretty hard thing to do because they built these systems to hide it all, right? But even just in town here, there's a pharmacy right on Trunk Road, right across from Lee's Chicken Street, where that is.
Yeah.
And Lyle Jordan, or sorry, I shouldn't say his name, but a guy that knows the business right next door was filming this, and there's a group there that get their drugs from the pharmacy. Well, there was this one video, a lady, a citizen, a clear citizen, drives in, parks way away from this crowd of people because she's trying to avoid them, gets out of her car, walks past them like nervous. You can see her, she's trying to get around these people that are using drugs, and goes to the pharmacy, knocks on the door, it's closed. So she turns around, goes back to her car, around them, nervous. Not even a minute later, clearly very high individual, stumbles around the corner, comes to the front door, door's locked, goes to the window, knocks on the door. They open the door, let her in. She gets the drugs, comes back out, goes around the corner and sells it to somebody else. While the citizen that needs actual medication is not being served, the drug addicts are getting drugs and then selling them on the street. That's like,
yeah. I mean, like what you'd think there's some criminality to doing that, right? You'd think, right? Like you have an obligation as a pharmacist to serve the community, and yeah. But one of the things that statement you just brought up is so important here, but it's very hard to deal with, is that once you go up the ladder a little bit, it gets like into the rabbit hole of conspiracy thinking, really. Like, what is ruling this world? What is actually governing things? Because so much of it at a higher level is just absolutely abhorrent, like mind-boggling. Like there's more human sex slaves in history than there's ever been right now, right? And in the States with their crazy southern border issue, there's all these human trafficking going on, and that seems to be something that the government is at least turning a blind eye to. And it's like, what is this? How can you possibly do this? So I think when we go back to one of the things in the beginning of the discussion, though, and I asked you about like, how do you see dealing with the problem of the homelessness and the drug addictions at a local level when it's federal policy that happens to be impinging it, is, and this is connected to the healthcare situation too, is decentralization and more autonomy to the local governance,
right?
So that you clean up your town.
That's right.
Then that seed spreads. And because the last thing, even if we got somebody in as the prime minister who really did honestly want to do something about this, but if he was dictating how everybody has to do exactly the same thing, we're going to get a problem there, because not everybody's going to work in the same dynamic.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a solution in a way, at least theoretically, towards a lot of the big scale problems we have, is local, grassroots, control going back to people that actually live where they're dealing
Yeah.
with, and then keeping that within the parameters of our the Canadian Charter of Rights and and the laws and all that.
Right.
Because I don't think there's whatever's going on at the higher levels, right? Like whatever's going on behind the scenes, it's so ugly that I don't think it's reformable, right?
So yeah, it has to be completely wiped out. Like you can't fix corruption with corruption. You need to remove it, right?
Yeah.
You have to start over. Like it's disgusting. Every time I see something from the government going on, spending billions of dollars in other parts of the world, when we're faced with like what is going on, they're just printing money and like it's absurd.
Oh yeah, and I mean I've never understood how we haven't crashed the economy completely based on like just printing more and more and more and more money, right? Like it seems
Yeah,
unreal.
the U.S. is printing $1 trillion every 100 days.
Yeah, like that just it can't keep going. It has
No,
to.
they can't. They're just destroying it.
Yeah, but that's a concerning element of that. Again, to sort of put the tinfoil hat on is like it's all so coordinated. It's seemingly coordinated towards like destroying Western society's foundational structure.
Yeah,
And like
yeah.
to what end? To what end? What do you want to do? Do you want chaos? Like what is this?
Have you seen Dr. Shawarma?
Shawarma. I know the name.
Yeah, he's it's something you should look up. But he's an independent kind of political person that's fighting for reform, and this is kind of what he talks about. But he does a really good quick diagram of how this elite system, how the few, the swarm thing. I think it's Dr. Trump. I'll send it to you a link, but how that system automatically controls the many, and it's like because I can't describe it, but it's definitely something that kind of points to how that all works, because it all happens naturally, like a swarm of birds where one bird isn't thinking, but collectively they're all doing the same purpose, right? So it's just destroying everything underneath it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So that manipulation is a big part of the solution too, because if you can see it's a manipulation, you don't get manipulated so easily.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's a big one. Like I learned that actually many years ago by reading, because I'm into history and was reading up about the story of Genghis Khan, right? The famous Mongolian ruthless leader, right? And there's a story about him teaching his sons how to rule. And what he did is he took them out into a field on horseback, and there was a herd of sheep, and he just ran at the herd of sheep with the horse. And as soon as one sheep ran in one direction, they all ran in that same direction.
Right.
And that the lesson was, this is what fear does to people. It makes them go one way, whatever I got to do, just do it. They'll think, right?
Right.
And this was mind-boggling to me during the worst of the COVID times, because there's some of the stuff that was being implemented was so crazy. And especially like what really bothered, like the forcing children to go through this sort of, fear indoctrination thing where like you're gonna make kill grandma by making her sick if you go visit her, right? Like that's so bad. That's so bad. But people just did it because they weren't thinking. Yeah. And so you're right. I think that that's a big part of it. And part of this comes back to the bigger picture thing is people need to empower themselves to think clearly and not be so persuaded by authority just because they're the mayor of the town or the prime minister. Who cares? It's a thought. You can question the thinking.
That's right. And I think that's why what has given me a lot of power here is because I don't give a shit. I'm outside of my business is at home. I'm kind of outside of the town, because there's a lot of people that have been doing this fight for the last 10 years, have been coming up against the mayors, have been fighting, speaking up about them, and they just get buried because their business license are revoked. They're getting overpowered by the systems in town. Their businesses are in jeopardy if they don't follow along, if they don't play along. Then these people have weapons against them. I don't give a shit. My customers are sometimes halfway across the country or even in the States. And it was part of the thing when this all kind of boiled up. I was like, oh boy, what have I done? I was just sticking my head out pretty far here. But then I came to the realization that if there's someone so set against what I'm doing that they won't purchase from my business or be a customer of mine, I don't want them as a customer either, right? So for every for every person that doesn't like me, there's 10 that's right on the same page. So I just like, no, we're good. And now it's like, I'll go and speak to the mayors and then I'll just say it like it is. I don't give a shit what, because this is the truth. And I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. There's been a few things where I'm like, oh, wow, no, I take that back. And that's because we're growing. We're learning how to become human. It's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to stand up and yell and go, oh, fuck, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But, you know, how about this, right? Or whatever, because we're just being human.
Yeah.
But I love that. I can stand up and these people and not give a shit.
Well, that's great. And that gives you a wonderful, ground to stand on, because you have the ability to withstand some of the attacks that might come back.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at getting my, my license for acupuncture in the next year. And
Right.
that's a concern I have, because if I have political opinions that disagree with the way that the healthcare policy is, which I do,
Right.
could they take my license away? And they might try, if we have this government in place. Like, I'm watching really closely what's happening with Jordan Peterson and the license issues that he's having. Do you know about that?
It sounds familiar, but you have to refresh my memory.
Well, you know who Jordan Peterson is, I'm sure, right?
The name's ringing a bell, like it.
Oh, okay. So he's a very vocal guy. He's a Canadian psychiatrist, and
Okay.
he came out 20 years ago now, against a lot of the crazy policies coming from the crazy woke sort of side of things.
Right.
And he's now having his clinical license threatened by the Ontario licensing board because of his political opinions.
Right.
And he's fighting it because he has he's very successful with his YouTube platform now. So he has lots of money and he can sort of, like you said, sort of be independent.
Right.
But if he loses his license, it sets a precedent that the licensing boards can take away, licenses like that for political opinions.
Right.
And that's crazy. That's not democracy.
Yeah, they've already been doing that. I mean, even just, for the vaccine, taking jobs away and, medical, like it's absolutely.
Well, and this is where we go back to, like, is this democracy? Because if it's democracy, we're allowed to say what we think and have a public debate. But if we don't have democracy, what do we have? What kind of government do you call that? And nobody wants to say the word, but if it's not democracy, it isn't. It is something. Like, there's a word, there's words in this, right?
For sure. Absolutely. It's tyranny. It's absolute chaos. It's not acceptable by me. I mean, I'm not sure the exact numbers, but there was just that bill passed about hate speech where you could get life in prison for demonizing the one specific thing was the oil and gas industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and that's another one where it's like, the intention is so concerning, because do you really want to cut off the energy resources of the country? Like,
right.
What are we talking about here? Like, I'm all for, like, environmentally friendly in the sense that we want to harmonize ourselves with nature and not pollute. And I'm 100% behind that.
Right. Right.
But, my mom is 73 now, and she needs her house to be heated in the winter, and she needs her fridge to work. And those are not negotiable. I'm not going to walk those back, right? Like, so like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
But I think that your success so far, to sort of bring it around again, is because even if the government itself is blind and willfully blind to what the people are thinking, the people are not buying into it like they were.
That's right.
And I think COVID, actually, as horrible as it was a wake-up call. And now there's more people than ever before going, no, there's something wrong here. But the thing that needs to happen, and again, I'm going to give you lots of credit for this, Travis, because you're standing up as a leader, is there has to be leaders that go forward, because most people just don't have it in them to do that, right? And it's kind of like, I always think in a martial art context of the spear tip, right? The whole spear matters, right? The shaft of the spear matters, but the tip has to be strong and sharp and able to withstand that initial moment of hitting the target, right?
Yeah. And
not everybody can do that. So I really would hope that you continue to do this, because I think you're a good example of what a person can do. And I really like how you're holding the local politicians to account. I think that's exactly what needs to happen. Give you huge credit for that.
It's happening in lots of little groups all over the country now, but when you finally have a place that people can come to and feel heard and give power to their voice, then they have a purpose and a direction that they can speak to, right? So if that's, like you say, the shaft and the spear, everyone coming together with a direction and not being swayed by political agenda, or no one's trying to be the mayor, no one's trying to get votes or become popular. We've just had enough. And I often, a lot of the times I'll post a picture with just a single spear in the ground, like this is it. We're drawing a line in the stone. We're not going to allow this anymore.
Right. Well, an actual boundary.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, but that's just it. I mean, it's not complicated. It's just hard on the sort of the psychology of the person to stand up. That's the hard part.
Right.
Yeah, because we are a species, and I think about this a lot too, where we're a species that evolved largely as a prey species, right? We were eaten by other species more than we ate other species. Right. And that makes it makes like you looking at a squirrel, right? Or a deer, their response is to run away from anything. Right. Right. And so in order to fully become human, you have to overcome that part of yourself and be willing to stand up. And that's part of that whole thing of like finding meaning and finding a purpose. And then I think that in many ways that alone, just the effort of doing that helps people that might have been falling off the edges come back and get their feet under them again.
100%.
Yeah. So if people are interested in your group, do you want to do a shout out to how to contact it or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna dig into a little bit more, make it official, probably, I don't know, organization, and be a little bit. I've got the website domain and stuff now, which is CanadianCitizensAgainstCrime.com, but it's not active yet. Primarily, it's a Facebook group, and it's Canadian Citizens Against Crime and Public Drug Abuse. And you'll see on the logo an image like this at the top of the header that you'll see. It's a little bit different, but it's very similar. So you know you found the right one. It's red.
Okay. Do you got any public meetings, rallies coming up that you want to talk about?
Nothing definitive at the moment, but we're due for one real quick. So right now I'm just trying to figure out, at the same time as I'm running my business, and being with my family, I'm just trying to formulate on the next big move, because I don't want to just be walking down the street with signs kind of willy-nilly. Like when we do things, it's got to have purpose. It's got to get media attention. It's got to, send a message. So I kind of wait a little bit until that congeals before I initiate it. But we are there is not initiated by me, but we've had some successful rallies in the Valley here against the CBRD tax hike. So we did get that lowered a little bit, but there's another one on April 1st. That's nationwide. That's for to axe the carbon tax. And it's all the way, the idea is that all the way across the country, everyone's protesting at the border to shut the border down, essentially, to say we're not taking this 20% carbon tax.
Interesting. Okay, that's cool.
So and on the island, I think the group is trying to get everyone to go to the MLA office in Nanaimo to get as many people there, but obviously, who knows?
Okay. I'm going to be on the island at the end of April, so I'll keep an eye out for anything that's coming up around then too, because I'd like to.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, because Duncan's my home and my heart. Right. I plan on getting back there at some point too. So, Travis, I think you're doing a great thing, and I give you all the power in the world to keep doing it. And thanks for spending a bit of time to talk about it and share your story. And maybe we'll check in with you again in a few months, see how it's going.
Yep.
And other than that, anything else you want to just throw out there? But I think we've filled up the hour pretty good.
Yeah, I want to thank you for reaching out, and honor you as a brother. We grew up together. I love it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Thank you.